So this is a question every real estate investor has to answer at some point in time. Should I allow pets in my rental property? And in the ideal world, we would all say no, because we don't want to take the risk of taking a pet on into a property. But let's take a step back and let's look at a couple aspects of pets to consider whether or not it's wise to take pets into our rental property. The first thing we need to know is this: 65%. 65% of all tenants come with pets. That means if you're going to say no pets across the board, you have just cut 65% of your potential renters market away from your property. You've cut them out. You're only dealing with 35% of the potential renters that are out there in the industry. That's a huge aspect. That's a big, large chunk of the population that you're going to say, I won't even consider you for renting my property. So what that means is it's going to take longer for you to rent your property. So that in and of itself would maybe say, gosh, maybe we really should consider allowing pets. Now, if we're going to do that, the question comes, well, what types of pets? We don't want to just say, bring your crazy pets and you're all welcome. We want to limit that. We want to have types of restrictions on pets and not allow anything. So dogs, typically the small to medium-sized dog and even the large dogs at times, no problem. Cats, a little bit higher risk, but that's certainly doable from that standpoint. Having restrictions is a necessity of accepting pets. You want to have restrictions as it relates to breed, as it relates to size, and as it relates to the number. So that way you can mitigate the risk of taking pets, but you're still able to capitalize on the benefit of bringing a tenant into the property that has pets. Now, when you do that, you want to have a strong pet addendum to your lease. That's going to line out the restrictions. It's going to put the rules in place. For example, it's going to state that the tenant must pick up after the pet waste. The tenant is going to be responsible for any specific pet damage that the pet causes. And one thing we find on average is that individuals with pets typically stay in properties longer. Why? Because it's harder to rent a property with a pet. So if you can find that individual that has a pet or that family that has a pet, they're probably going to stay a little bit longer than the individual or family that doesn't have a pet. So that's a big benefit to landlords. But you want to include that pet addendum, which is going to outline the rules and regulations for pets. Fifth, pet deposit. Now, whether you call it a pet deposit or you just increase the amount of the deposit, we want to get some extra assurance in the form of a deposit, in the form of increased rent, for the risk that we are taking on as a landlord by allowing that pet. So depending on the market conditions at the time, we may or may not be able to get some additional deposit, some additional pet rent coming in on that. The last thing to be aware of is service animals. Now here's where it gets sticky, because service animals are a big deal right now. Now we're well trained and we're well versed and understand what you have to go through from the legal side of things from service animals, but you want to be very cautious, because if you're saying no pets across the board, you have the legal right to do that. However, if someone brings in a legal service animal, that is legally not a pet. You have to walk through specific steps. You've got to be very, very cautious. But if you make a mistake on this, you're going to find yourself in trouble with the government, and the fines on this are astronomical. So give us a call. We'd be happy to explain the pet process, give you some advice on that, explain service animals, but be very, very cautious. But when you take pets, if you follow the proper procedures, it can be beneficial to both the tenant and the landlord.